Good morning. Welcome to episode 62 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. Today, it's going to be just me. If you had not heard last week, I'm trying to adjust my lighting on the fly here. If you didn't hear last week, Duval Rundown is now 5 days a week. I will be here on Mondays to take your listener questions. Hayes Carline will join me on Tuesdays. I'll have a national guest on Wednesdays. Really excited about the one for this week. Going to learn a lot about Liam Cohen. Thursdays will still be me, O'Brien, and Hacker is going to join me on Fridays. So really excited to get some Jaguars content out to you guys 5 days a week, even in the off season. Today we're going to go over some Super Bowl takeaways, potentially we'll do a 7-round mock draft. I'll see if I can share my screen and take any listener questions if there are any. So if you have any questions about the Super Bowl, questions about the Jaguars, questions about anything, let me know. Maybe I'll ask you guys questions too. But yeah, let's start with Super Bowl takeaways. I think everyone's big takeaway from the Eagles walloping the Chiefs in Super Bowl 59 last night was that trenches matter, pretty obviously. Not just that the Eagles invested so much in their pass rush, and that obviously paid off, but the Chiefs, even though they have made past investments in their offensive line, their tackle play has been pretty shoddy, even with especially the big investment in Jawan Taylor. So Jawan plays on the right side, former Jaguar, but I don't even remember who was originally starting at left tackle for the Chiefs at the beginning of the season. It might have been DJ Humphries, but all Pro Bowl, future Hall of Fame offensive guard Joe Thuney ended up switching to offensive tackle in the middle of the season, kind of later in the season, and then he stayed at left tackle through the playoffs. Oops. So, sorry about that. Just put a bark collar on ketchup, so we'll see how well that's going to be working today. But yeah, let me close the store real quick. I'll be right back. Sorry. All right, a little treat for the people watching the video. So basically what I'm getting at is that Joe Thuney is an incredible football player. And Jaguars center Mitch Morse actually said on Twitter/X this week that what he's done to be able to transition from guard out to tackle has been one of the most impressive feats that Morse has ever seen. I don't know if he said ever seen in a football atmosphere or if he clarified. But yeah, it was really impressive for Thuney to be able to go out to offense tackle and be able to hold up. But the problem is that you could then create a weak link at guard. So hypothetically, Jalen Carter and Milton Williams, the Eagles' great defensive tackle, pass rushers duo, could have teed off against what is now a weak link at guard, because offensive line generally is just a weak link position. It matters less about how much star power you have on the offensive line, and it matters more about just not having any weak links and not having any weaknesses that opposing defenses and players and coordinators can use against you. And so by moving Thuney out to tackle, you then had a weak link at guard. And then that was a potential problem in the pass rush or in the passing game, but more so in the running game. I feel like the Chiefs didn't even really try to run the ball at all yesterday. And I think that it was generally expected because they kind of knew they wouldn't have a lot of success, especially since Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco, neither one of them are particularly explosive, at least at this point, because they're not fresh into the league anymore. And so they abandoned the run a little bit. And then the problem with Thuney ended up being arm length, which you always hear about arm length, especially in terms of prospects throughout draft season. Draft season's officially underway now since the Super Bowl just ended yesterday. But Josh Sweat, the Eagles defensive end, has a wingspan or arm length about 2.5 inches longer than Joe Thuney. And you saw that it mattered yesterday. Even like Jalix Hunt, who I'm pretty sure is a 4th-round rookie, had a really good speed to power move on Thuney. Thuney was getting worked a little bit. He's an awesome player, but he was just mismatched. And so to me, the takeaway from last night's game is less so like, oh, invest in trenches, because that's kind of obvious, but it's more that it's all about mismatches in football. It's about whether you can get your best receiver on the worst coverage defender. It's about if you can get your electric running back out into space. And then it's about whether you can win the mismatches or not just win mismatches, but prevent any mismatches from happening too along the trenches. And so again, for offensive line, the theory is it can't be a weak link group. You definitely need to invest in it to the point that there's just no weaknesses. And then for the defensive line, you just got to be able to get a lot of different collections of bodies. I think that Josh Sweat being as long as he is, and then having who's number 3 on the Eagles? Nolan Smith Jr. out of Georgia on the other side, who kind of just like screams off the edge and is a great speed rusher. Having a bunch of different types of pass rushers is definitely good to have on the defensive line. So that was kind of my reaction to yesterday. Still think Patrick Mahomes is on his way to being the GOAT. I think anyone who has a strong Patrick Mahomes take after yesterday is probably overreacting a little bit and falling into some recency bias. He's still incredible. He's still the best player in the NFL, regardless of position, regardless of positional value even. So definitely have no worries about Mahomes. A little bit worried about where they're going to go from here in terms of, is Travis Kelce going to retire? Is Chris Jones going to retire? Probably not. But, I mean, it's really hard to get the 3 straight Super Bowls and to be able to sustain that amount of success, especially in the NFL. So it'll be really cool to see, I think, honestly, how much Mahomes is able to keep the Chiefs relevant, I think, because like Andy Reid is awesome, but I don't think that he has I think Bill Belichick clears him by a mile. So I like the Bill Belichick, Tom Brady combo was able to sustain success for a long amount of time. And I mean, Andy Reid is another guy who's probably going to retire in just a handful of years. And so it'll be really interesting to see how Mahomes is able to hold up the Kansas City Chiefs even after like this kind of phase of the dynasty ends. So yeah, I think that's enough Super Bowl talk for now, especially since I don't really have any comments. Doesn't seem like anyone's too interested in me going further. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a Jaguars mock draft. I usually like doing Pro Football Focus for these. I know Pro Football Network is also popular. Let's see if I can get this up and share my screen. But I'm going to need some help from the live listeners because I'm familiar with what's going on in the first round. I could talk through the 5th overall pick for the Jaguars and where they should go based on who's there. But after that, I don't know. I'm going to be a little lost. I don't really start paying attention to the draft until I really have to. So mock draft simulator, PFF. Let's see if I can share the screen. Oh boy, that's trippy. All right, I'm just going to, hopefully this will work. All right, Jaguars, 7 rounds. We'll take it slow. Public board, I like that. All right, let's get to it. Jaguars mock draft time. Start trade. Titans go Cam Ward. That's who I think they're going to take as well. We've got Abdul Carter and Shadur Sanders and Ted McMillan off the board. And so do I think that Colorado two-way superstar Travis Hunter is going to make it to the 5th overall pick? Probably not. But do I think that the Jaguars would sprint to the podium if he were there? Yes. So that's what I'm going to do in this mock scenario. I'm going to pick Travis Hunter, but to talk through it a little bit more, Ashton Jeanty, I think, is 5th overall pick caliber of player or prospect, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense on the Jaguars since they have Trevor Lawrence, so they should be a pass-first team, but then they also obviously have Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby under contract for not just 1 year, but I think 2 more years. And so again, for the podcast listeners, especially who are not watching this, 7-round Jaguars mock draft. The first 4 picks in this PFF mock were quarterback Cam Ward to the Titans, edge rusher Abdul Carter to the Browns, quarterback Shadur Sanders to the Giants, and wide receiver Ted McMillan to the Patriots. So I'm going to go with cornerback Travis Hunter, but cornerback Will Johnson and defensive tackle Mason Graham, both from Michigan, would be my next 2. I think that Will Campbell, the offensive tackle who could turn into an offensive guard from LSU, would be an interesting pick. I'm not against it. But yeah, I mean, I know that I just went over the Super Bowl and said, oh, trenches matter. And it's about mismatches. But man, the Jags have not had multiple good coverage defenders since A.J. Bouye and Jalen Ramsey were in town. So Travis Hunter's my pick. Just going to pop over every once in a while to check if there's any comments. I should have. Maybe I can speed this up. Oh, I'll lose my current draft process. Oh, here's the speed. Start flying through this. The Jags have 10 draft picks in this class. With this next one, I think that it's pretty important to consider not just positional value, but also where there's big drop-offs in tiers for positions throughout the draft. And so usually like there's a really big drop-off at the end of the first round or the beginning of the second round in wide receivers and defensive tackles. And it's because wide receivers obviously have been arguably a little bit overvalued in recent years as the NFL has become so pass happy, especially before the 2024 season, because at this point we're kind of seeing the trend go back the other way, where running the ball and playing single high safeties and stuff like that is cool again and efficient again, and it's working. But because of how popular wide receivers have gotten in recent years, generally, wide receivers, the good ones, will kind of fly off the board. And then for defensive tackles, I think that Mason Smith, at the time, even though I didn't know about Mason Smith really, I thought it was a good pick for the Jaguars because you don't really take there's rarely defensive tackles with pass rush upside available past the first round. And if there is, it's like an example like Mason Smith, where he had injury question marks, or an example like Chris Jones, where I don't remember exactly what made him fall to the second round, if it was injuries or off the field stuff, but something made Chris Jones fall to the second round. And so again, usually you can't find pass rushing defensive tackles past the first round. And so my immediate thought for pick 36 was to go with a pass rushing defensive tackle, especially since I passed on Mason Graham at 5th overall, or to go with a good receiver. And so looking at the board, top options are Josh Connerly. I'm not even going to say all the names because I barely recognize them, and I don't know if you guys will. But I'm going to go with Jack Beck, the wide receiver out of TCU. He was already firmly on my radar before the Senior Bowl, but then he was technically the biggest winner of the Senior Bowl because I think he won MVP after getting the game-winning catch. But again, even before the Senior Bowl, like I don't think people should put that much stock into it, especially for a position like receiver. But Jack Beck is like, he's almost like he gets a lot of Puka Nacua comps because he's a really tough player. He's athletic, but not like Justin Jefferson or Brian Thomas Jr. athletic. But he's just really great after the catch. And I think that even though Brian Thomas proved that he was good after the catch and could take a lot of screens last season, I think the Jaguars, it would be cool for them to get someone that's truly a yards after catch weapon. And Jack Beck is that. And yeah, so there we go. All right. Let me know if you guys like any other prospects, because this is kind of the point where I get lost. We're at the 70th pick in the 3rd round right now. The only name I recognize is Dylan Gabriel, the Oregon quarterback, but obviously we're not going to go there. All right, so since I don't really recognize these names, I'm just going to keep talking about positions and position value. I think that there's 2 safeties at the top of the board. So 3 safeties are like the top 8 players on the board for PFF. So I'm going to go with the safety because let's go with Sebastian Castro. Shout out to my Iowa people, Alfie Crow, Mia O'Brien, anyone else I'm forgetting. We're going to go with Sebastian Castro, the Iowa safety, because I think Jacksonville, I mean, we did already address secondary with the first pick going with Travis Hunter, but like Jacksonville has not just been missing like multiple quality coverage defenders, but also like playmaking coverage defenders. Tyson Campbell is by far and away their best coverage defender right now, but he's also not a huge playmaker, especially in the pass game. I would actually say he's a playmaker in the run game, but like one of the few weaknesses in his game is ball production. And so therefore there's not a lot of playmaking, but he's still a great corner. To be able to add, I don't know if Sebastian Castro even qualifies as a playmaking safety, but I just think that Jacksonville has been decimated. Their defense has been decimated over the middle of the field for a long time now. And so I think it definitely makes sense to shore up the cornerback room, but it also makes sense to shore up the middle of the defense and the spine of the defense. So Sebastian Castro, you're my guy. All right, Dylan Gabriel is still there. Let's go with Georgia guard Tate Ratledge because that name looks a little bit familiar. I think that day 3, right now we're picking 88th overall in the 3rd round. I think day 3 is definitely the sweet spot to take interior offensive lineman. I am hoping that the Jaguars actually make a solid investment in free agency because I think that interior offensive lineman and interior defensive lineman too, but especially the former, is a position that you can feel safe about spending money on in free agency because usually like the premium positions, you really or for the premium positions, teams don't let really good players and especially good players at premium positions hit the open market. And so when there is someone like that, so a T. Higgins would be a perfect example for this year. He's objectively going to be overpaid because there's just not a lot of players of his caliber at his position available. But for interior offensive line, that's a position where there actually is a decent amount of good options out there on the free agent market. And so it's not like a crazy, you have to go crazy spending for anyone. Trey Smith from the Chiefs, even if he was on the losing team in the Super Bowl, is probably going to make a buttload of money. But I think just generally, it's smart to spend on interior offensive line. But even still, I think it makes sense to invest in general. So I'm going to go with Tate Ratledge. Let's see, we had a comment over here. Do we know who all is scheduled to interview today? That's a good question. I'll come back with Hayes tomorrow. I assume 2 Chase on YouTube is talking about Jacksonville's general manager candidates. That's definitely the big thing for the Jaguars this week, but I don't have a ton of information on that right now. So again, we'll talk about Jaguars general managers with Hayes on tomorrow's show. All right, pick 105, round 4. Let's go with an edge player because edge is definitely a position that gets scooped up quick. Like there's a couple of like interesting prospects that you can usually find in the 3rd and 4th rounds, but really it's kind of similar to finding a pass rushing defensive tackle. If you want a really good edge defender, you're going to need to take one early. And so Jacksonville objectively needs to add depth to its edge room. And so I'm just going to take the top edge on the board before I get out of the 4th round. So with pick 105, I'm going with Texas edge Barron Sorrell. Welcome to Jacksonville. Alrighty. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 picks to go. We're halfway through. Pick 124 in round 4, so still in the 4th round. Who so far we've taken Travis Hunter, cornerback Travis Hunter with a 5th pick, wide receiver Jack Beck with a 36th pick, Iowa safety Sebastian Castro with the 70th pick, Georgia guard Tate Ratledge with the 88th pick, and Texas edge Barron Sorrell with the 105th pick. So I like where we're at right now. Kind of want to invest in a corner or in a running back because I know that the Jags said they shouldn't take Ashton Genty in the 1st round at 5th overall, but I don't know. Maybe they could add to the room. I'm just scrolling right now trying to find a name that I recognize, so I apologize. Yeah, let's go with a running back because the Jags did take Keelan Robinson last year out of Texas to be a depth running back, potentially a scat running back, like a receiving type back, but more so a return specialist in special teams. But he was injured throughout the year, and it ended up being Devin Duvernay, who was a free agent signee, along with Parker Washington and Tank Bigsby being the main returners. So at this point, even if the Jags do have Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne, and I do think that Dearness Johnson is a pretty capable backup / special teams player too. I think Keelan Robinson might be fighting for a roster spot, and so let's get some competition for Keelan Robinson. And we'll go with Damian Martinez from Miami, the halfback. If you're a Hurricanes fan, let me know if that's a good pick or not. All right, 3 more picks. I'm going to go with Riley Leonard, the quarterback out of Notre Dame, because him and Quinn Ewers from Texas are on the board, two of the top 3 players on PFF's available players. And I think that I was talking to Taylor Daw at 1010XL in the office recently about this, where I feel like a few years ago, like 5 to 10 years ago, there was Ryan Fitzpatrick and it felt like a dozen other backup journeyman quarterbacks like him who were always available to kind of just plug and play or plug and chug as just a veteran backup on your team if you needed it. And this year, like looking at the veteran free agent quarterback options available, it's like CJ Beathard, Mac Jones, like Nick Mullins, Tyrod Taylor might be a free agent. Jameis Winston doesn't really fall into that like steady veteran presence, even if Jameis is a lot of fun on and off the field. But yeah, I think that the Jaguars, I think that the like backup veteran quarterback market has dried up because now instead of being backup quarterbacks, those types of players are just becoming assistant quarterback coaches, and they're just being because they were like pretty much unofficial coaches as backups, and now they're just being officially coaches. And so, long story short, I think that the Jaguars should look for a veteran backup quarterback in free agency this offseason, but I also don't think there's a lot of amazing options. And so if they ended up turning to the draft, I don't think that would be a bad idea. And I think Riley Leonard certainly wouldn't want to be like the fan of a franchise who takes Riley Leonard expecting him to become a franchise quarterback or anything close to it. But he's got rushing value. Seems like a good competitor. Seems like a good kid. I don't know. I think Riley Leonard would be a good backup quarterback on a rookie deal. So that is my 5th round pick. I think that's a little bit of a steal. 2 more picks. 182 is coming up next. Do we go with Emory Jones Jr., the LSU tackle? I think we should. Ooh, Ollie Gordon is available? Does he just have like terrible injury history? Because I did not think he was going to be around this long. I know who Ollie Gordon is. Jason Marshall. I remember when I was mocking Jason Marshall, who's a cornerback from Florida, in like Jaguars' first round mocks a year or 2 ago. So, woof. Graham Mertz is a name I see. Jimmy Horn Jr. Let's go with tight end actually, because I have heard that tight end, it's a good tight end class, and like again, sure, the Jags have Brenton Strange and Evan Engram, but at this point in the draft, you don't really need to weigh too heavily who's currently on your roster, especially because these late round picks, if they do work out, will probably take a couple of years to work out anyway. And so I think that the Jaguars should definitely take a tight end in this draft, considering that. I mean, I don't know if I think it's reasonable not to expect, but to see a path where Engram and Strange are no longer in the roster in like 2 years. Plus, Luke Farrell is a free agent or an impending free agent this season. So yeah, I think tight end makes sense for the Jaguars as a late round pick, but again, mostly just because I know it's a really good tight end class. So might as well dip our toes into that water. We're going to go with Texas Tech tight end Jalen Conyers. And now we've got one more pick, 7th round, pick 223. Just waiting for this to load. Got a few quarterbacks, got a few safeties. Well, since we started out this podcast talking about trenches, then I think I want to invest in the trenches once again. And so we got an edge player and we got a guard. And that's it. Oh man. So let's go. I mean, I'm interested to see, like, the reason I didn't take an offensive tackle earlier is because the Jags took Javon Foster in the 4th round out of Missouri last year, and he ended up playing 0 offensive snaps during the regular season, I believe. So I'm interested to see whether the Jags' new coaching staff and new management in general kind of views Javon Foster as a NFL caliber player or someone that's like worth keeping around or at least worth giving a shot to make the team, or if they're gonna. I mean, it's hard to be like, oh, last year he was terrible because like he wasn't on the field at all. It's hard to say he was terrible last year when you weren't in the building. And so I don't know like what the spectrum of hope looks like for Javon Foster. If it's fair to call him a bust, probably not, because it's only been 1 year. At the same time, him like not even being active for the majority of games, even after Cam Robinson was traded to Minnesota, isn't a great sign. So I'm interested to see what happens with Javon Foster, and more so, I'm interested to see how much or little Jacksonville invests in offensive tackle this offseason, because I think that'll be a good sign of what they think of Javon Foster. And so I'm gonna just not take an offensive tackle for now. We're gonna go back to the defensive trenches and go with Nebraska defensive tackle Ty Robinson, because he's the top defensive tackle name that I see. All right, let me take a screenshot of this. He's gonna let me. Here we go. It's grading my draft. Let's see what PFF gives me. B+, hooray. Top 32% of Jaguars drafts, whatever that means. Let me save this image real quick. Let me see it. All right, so recap for the audio listeners. 7-round Jaguars mock draft, and then we'll get to some listener questions if there are any. 5th-round pick, I took cornerback Travis Hunter because he was there. If he wasn't there, because I think he probably won't be, then I would go with Will Johnson. So cornerback either way. With a 36th pick in the 2nd round, I went with TCU wide receiver Jack Beck. With the 70th pick in the 3rd round, I went with Iowa safety Sebastian Castro. With the 88th pick in the 3rd round, I went with Georgia guard Tate Ratledge. With the 105th pick in the 4th round, I went with Texas edge Barron Sorrell. 124th pick in the 4th round, I went with Miami halfback Damian Martinez. And then I went with Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard, Texas Tech tight end Jalen Conyers, and Nebraska defensive tackle Ty Robinson to close it out. And so I think if you want to have any takeaways to this, just try to remember what I said about all the positions. Right now, I'm going less off the names and more about the positions and how I think the Jaguars should attack the NFL draft. So, yeah, let's check out what comments we have before we get out of here. Jags on tap. Shout out Jags on tap. Most people we interviewed at games seem to prefer Will Johnson over Travis Hunter. That's interesting. I feel like Travis Hunter, I think people are a little bit nervous about him because he doesn't seem like a sure thing. I think people really like the idea of having a sure thing. I mean, anywhere in the draft, I guess, but especially when you're spending a 1st-round pick and a top 5 pick. And so I was also a little bit iffy if late in the season when it seemed like the Jags were maybe even going to have the 1st pick or top 2 pick. I was a little bit iffy about Travis Hunter. Not that I was against it, but I wasn't convinced yet. I needed to do some more research. But at this point, I think that he's pretty easily a top 3 non-quarterback prospect in the draft. So I think he's the kind of guy that's like you just don't ever think him. Jags on tap. When do you want to come on to the show? For these Monday episodes, we'll see what happens. I'm kind of thinking that if there's not a lot of comments, then I'll start bringing true guests on rather than just looking or reading off the comments and stuff. But the point of this Monday episode is to be a mailbag. This really, the whole show I want to be as like audience geared as I can get it to be. But especially the Monday episodes are going to be mailbag oriented, getting your questions in, getting your Jags therapy in. Poor Eva said, why isn't he a sure thing as a Heisman, though, in the back-to-back seasons he had as a corner and a receiver? How aren't you convinced? It's not that I'm not convinced. It's just that I personally haven't done a lot of research. And so when people were saying that he was like a shoe-in Heisman and the shoe-in 1st overall pick, I guess what makes me nervous about Travis Hunter is that he is a two-way player, and I'm not sure yet. Maybe he is, but just me, since I don't dive into draft content, until like draft season starts. I'm not sure if because I have heard that some people are like, oh, Will Johnson is a better cornerback prospect. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard it. And so to me, I think the biggest draw to Travis Hunter is that he's a two-way player and great on both sides of the ball. But he's not going to be a two-way player in the NFL. I think the most likely scenario is that regardless of whatever team he goes to, I think he's going to be a cornerback, and then maybe the team will have a little package of offensive plays for him. But he's definitely not going to play both sides. And so, again, I think that what makes him so appealing is that he's incredible on both sides of the ball, but he's incredible on both sides of the ball for college. I don't know if he'd be Deion Sanders. So yeah, again, I'm not against Travis Hunter. I'm just not 1,000% in yet. That's all it is. So yeah, that's what this episode is going to be about. Me and you guys just chatting. But Floyd asked, do I wish I drafted Ollison over Martinez? Yes, because I don't know. I don't follow Miami football at all. Maybe Martinez is really good, but Ollie Gordon was my pick to win the Heisman before this season, and I think that he ran into some injuries. But if he's available in the sixth round, then I think that's worth the injury discount. So yeah, I think in hindsight, I would have maybe waited to draft a running back a little bit longer, especially if I had known that Ollie would have been there later. But yeah, Ollie Gordon. See, Floyd, you tripped me up because I was like, Ollison, that's not his name. Ollie Gordon, right? But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I'll try to post that graphic of the mock draft results. You guys can roast me on social media, but appreciate everyone for tuning in. We'll see what happens. We'll see how this goes, doing 5 days a week, especially in the off season. But I feel like that was a good episode. So see you guys here back tomorrow. Hayes Carlin is joining me at 9:04 a.m. Eastern. Thank you guys so much for joining. Take care. Have a good day.